November's headline act for the PlayStation, God of War Ragnarök, is undeniably worth your time. Releasing for the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 on the 9th of November, this is a direct sequel to 2018's God of War, and follows destroyer of the Greek pantheon, Kratos, and his son Atreus, as they try to survive Fimbulwinter, a prelude to the end of days, Ragnarök. The biggest change here is that the Atreus we see isn't the afraid child we knew. Instead, he's edging closer and closer to his rebellious teen phase. A theme running through this game is that of Atreus growing up and making his own decisions and mistakes, and he's not the only one. This truly is the ultimate dad game, wrapped up in the veneer of Nordic myth. I want to start with characters, as Ragnarök leans heavily upon them to deliver this narrative. For the most part, this story is underpinned by the rift between stubborn parental figures and angst-filled teens. At every point, this gap swirls and flows, with rare moments where father and child see eye to eye, and others where their journeys splinter from each other. This story does have a clear beginning and ending, but the middle is propped up by a lot of tenuous misunderstandings. This is largely reinforced by the division that forms between Kratos and Atreus. Atreus believes unquestionably in the prophecy he heard at the end of the first game. Kratos doesn't fully believe in the prophecy and only wants Atreus to be safe, regardless of what that means for him. Brok and Sindri return. As usual, they are here to help improve your gear and to provide mystical plot solutions when required. Other characters featured here include Thor, Odin, and Freya. Heimdall does make an appearance, as does the new Jotnar and Gaboda. Every single one of these is superbly written, designed, and delivered to make this feel like one of the most character-rich worlds possible. The standout character is undoubtedly Mimir though, Kratos' talking head companion. He fills the silence and provides incidental exposition at relevant moments. His role is so important in a game that is this cinematic and heavy throughout its main narrative. Overall, this experience clocks in at just over 50 hours for a completionist run, and if you're here for the story, there's around 25 to 30 hours in the main plot. The bulk of Kratos' dad's saga is underpinned by the shift from the fast-paced arcade-style combat that featured in the earlier games to this heavy, controlled, over-the-shoulder system. It's tailored very specifically not to be button-mashy and feels suitably weighty. Every action functions to be used at a very specific time and at the player's behest. Light swings are interwoven with heavy swings to create juggling combos or brutal finishes, with your companion's attacks an equalizer to help build up stagger gauges or stack elemental effects. This combat is mostly the same as the previous game, with the Leviathan Axe and Blades of Chaos available from the start. Ragnarok's combat focuses more on the freeze and flame aspects of each weapon, to promote more cycling between the two, with a new type of companion arrow to assist. Enemies have health bars and a stagger or stun gauge underneath them, and each weapon does a mix of both types of damage. Once the stun gauge fills, you can perform a brutal takedown, which often earned this game its PEGI 18 rating for violence. The biggest change here is that at times you play as Atreus without Kratos. His combat style is lighter and faster. He emphasizes ranged attacks rather than rending melee strikes. Both characters play quite similarly in the actual button presses, and you need to keep up the aggression with both to be successful, but you'll likely spend more time aiming with Atreus and more in the enemy's face with Kratos. When playing as either, you are accompanied by a companion to assist. Sindri and Brok fill these roles at times using their dwarven gadgets and tools. There are other companions throughout the story that fill this role too. Particularly for one of Atreus' plotlines, you are assisted by a Jotnar girl who uses paint magic. If anyone was ever in doubt about how much effort and time went into workshopping the particle effects and combat in this game, play this section. Outside of combat, this gameplay is almost identical to the first game. You use magical gates to travel between realms, and you can do this freely between most story missions. These involve exploring linear areas with few branching paths. At times, certain areas are fully open, and you are given a sled pulled by wolves to assist in getting around. Each of the 9 realms has been affected by Fimbulwinter and are different to what they were in the first game in many ways, yet there are some areas that look very similar. For large portions of this experience, you are solving puzzles or traversal challenges. These usually involve throwing Kratos' axe at something to move it into the correct location. These serve as a pacing function, but I was often chasing the next event or cutscene in this amazing story, only to have to solve several of these in a row. They aren't poorly designed or overly repetitive, but there are some locations where I would be removing 1 or 2 of these for expediency. In terms of progression, your overall character level is not reflective of the XP you have gained, and rather the overall gear score of your items, which ranges from 1 to 9. Gear can be found in chests as reward from quests or crafted by the dwarves. These can be further upgraded by providing hack silver and materials. XP is gained from felling enemies, and this can be used to unlock new skills for each weapon. There are 3 weapons to spend points on, each of which having a wide array of skills. What's new here is that once you've used a skill enough times, you can dump more XP into it to boost its effectiveness. Runic attacks return, and they behave mostly as they did in the first game. These can be upgraded to improve their effects. The game adds a relic slot too, which provides a variety of functions from straight up damage to a burst of rage. There are a wealth of valuable options here to pick from in each category, and your versatility in combat improves with each skill unlocked. Your power, however, is only improved by upgrading your gear. Another new addition is the amulet that you need to repair by collecting items. Think of this like slotting a gem in other games. You gain a stat increase and can further improve your character by slotting 3 of these that belong to a specific family for a set bonus. If I'm picking a weakness in this combat system, it would be a mismatch in some of the enemy designs, which haven't shifted too much from the original game. This works well for lore reasons, but does contribute towards the weakest aspect of this sequel. Not much stands out in the regular roster of soldiers or monsters. There are worm-type enemies that burrow underground and feel more like environmental puzzles rather than enemies to fight. The Dark Elf enemies are generally annoying. They move very quickly and leave explosions in their wake, which feels like a deliberate design to frustrate what is a primarily melee fighter. The boss fights, particularly some of the optional ones, are quite challenging, and you should start mastering the parry, which is mapped to L1, as soon as you can. The default setting for range targeting is very sticky and slow to move away from an enemy target. This is notably frustrating when you have to attack orbs or floating magic to save yourself. The story bosses all feel fair. You never feel like you can't get past them, and if you side quest enough, these counters are relatively easy. The endgame Berserker King and Valkyrie Queen are certainly not. Where Ragnarök really shines is how all of its gameplay elements are woven together. There's a new level of harmony between all the mechanics that really elevates this game beyond the game in 2018, despite being mostly the same. This game has open world elements letting you freely explore without being confined to narrow corridors, but it never falls completely into a lifeless box-checking list of content. The game has RPG elements, but these complement rather than overpower player skill. This system is also detailed enough that it keeps fans of these mechanics content, while not being so overwhelming for those who don't want to micromanage their gear every second of the game. These characters are all emotionally upfront without being overbearing, and that only helps enforce their relatability. None of them are perfect people, but each is a perfectly crafted character. The visual design for each one of these is also exceptional, and these fit so well with their mannerisms and behaviour. This game also has pages of accessibility options and tweaks you can make, many more so than any other game I can recall. It ran flawlessly, and the only noticeable bug or glitch I saw was that the glow from some treasure locations wouldn't disappear after they'd already been looted. For a PlayStation exclusive, the haptic triggers are quite underutilised here, aside from a scene where you're mining ore for story reasons. There's not much more than the rumble you'd get on a PS4 controller. This was quite disappointing, and I suspect that cross-generational availability of this title made spending time on this feature a lower priority than polishing the game. As I draw this review to a close, let me say that God of War Ragnarök is the best narrative in a AAA game that I've played in 2022. With all that said, it's still quite frustrating. This game is undoubtedly excellent, but it still feels like a tidier and more refined part of the PS4 or Xbox One era of gaming. Maybe this is just me, reaching for an unachievable ideal of what the PS5 and the Xbox Series were supposed to bring. But nothing here is so outstandingly new or original in gameplay or mechanics that I was blown away. When all's said and done, Ragnarök is a must-buy if you own either PlayStation console, and it may well be one of the best told video game stories we'll see in our lifetime. There's also lots of hints and nods buried in this game if you're into the Norse myths, but be aware that they do take a lot of liberties with the base lore. Santa Monica Studios have now captured lightning in a bottle twice, in an era where we've come to accept mediocrity as the norm, and I have absolutely no reservations in recommending this game to anyone.